My name is Sherry. It's almost been 5 years since I married my husband Adolf. We both work, and while we're generally busy, we lead fulfilling lives. I have a father and a younger brother. My mother passed away due to an illness 2 years ago, and since then, my father, Jacob, has been living alone. When my mother passed away, I was worried about him. I talked to Adolf and expressed, "I'm concerned about my father. I'd like to live closer to my childhood home." With that, Adolf and I decided to move closer to my family home after my mother's passing. We could have moved in with Jacob, but he declined our offer. When I suggested, "Dad, I worry about you living alone. Let's live together," he replied, "You're as strict as your mother, and I want some freedom in my life." That certainly put me in my place. I do tend to nag like my mother, and I've reprimanded Jacob for never doing any housework and always relying on my mother. I guess he thought it would be a hassle and wouldn't get any peace living with me. I was still worried about Jacob, but I didn't think it necessary to force him to live with us if he was against it, so we ended up just moving close to my childhood home. I'd visit and cook meals for him regularly, and we would engage in trivial chats. I thought this level of distance was just right. Then, a year ago, my brother Leon got married. Before his marriage, he was living alone, so we didn't get much chance to interact, but I was still overjoyed when I heard about his engagement. Leon's wife, Kira, is a lovely person, and initially I was delighted to have such a sweet sister-in-law. However, the moment Leon's wedding was confirmed, Jacob suddenly suggested, "Why don't you two live with me after the wedding?" Despite him refusing my proposal earlier, even though I was taken aback, I knew Jacob adored Leon, so his suggestion wasn't surprising. Indeed, Kira was much kinder to Jacob, very different from me. Jacob would repeatedly mention how sociable and adorable Kira was, but the person who was not particularly thrilled with this was Kira herself. Of course, she didn't openly express her discomfort in front of Jacob, but when they got home, she apparently said to Leon, "I'm not too keen on living with your father. I'd rather live with my mother." Leon wasn't too thrilled about living together either, given that they had just gotten married, so the idea of them moving in with Jacob was eventually dismissed. A few months after that, when I visited my family home for the first time in a while, I noticed something odd about Jacob. Jacob, who usually has breakfast at 7 a.m. and lunch at noon, was eating his meal around 10 a.m. when I arrived. "Dad, are you having a late breakfast today or an early lunch?" When I asked him, he said it was breakfast. I didn't think much of it at the time, but when I casually went to the kitchen to clean the house, I noticed dishes that had been used for breakfast left in the sink. Jacob always did the dishes before bed, so these dishes couldn't have been from last night. They were from this morning. Feeling something was off, I asked Jacob again, "Father, the dishes are in the sink. Didn't you have your breakfast?" At that, Jacob suddenly slammed the table and stood up and shouted, "What, are you trying to say that I'm losing it?" Saying so, he turned beet red and got mad at me. Sure, Jacob was hot-tempered, but I'd never seen him this unreasonable before, so I was stunned. Then, as quick as a flash, Jacob's face relaxed. "I gotta fix breakfast," he said, picking up the dishes we'd just finished eating off of and headed for the kitchen. I thought it was definitely strange, so I suggested Jacob go to the hospital. However, he stubbornly refused. What's more, he begged me, tears welling up in his eyes. "Don't tell Leon and the others, please," he pleaded. I suppose Jacob felt something was off about himself. Not wanting to worry his beloved son and daughter-in-law, he strongly resisted sharing his symptoms with Leon and the others. I consulted Adolf many times, but in the end, we decided it was best to respect Jacob's wishes, so I never told Leon and his family about Jacob's cognitive issues. Despite our concerns, we suggested to Jacob several times that we should live together. However, Jacob didn't change his mind, insisting if I were to live with anyone, it'd be Leon and his family. That was all he would say. We would have loved to have lived with Leon and his family, but we couldn't ask them to do so without telling them about Jacob's condition. Adolf and I were at our wits' end. But about 2 months later, I got a phone call from Jacob at his home. He said cheerfully, "I've got something to tell you. Come over." Since Adolf had to work that day, I went over to his home alone. There, Jacob was with, surprisingly, Leon. "What's up? And why is Leon here?" When I asked that, Jacob answered with a broad smile. "Actually, I've decided to tear down this house and build a new one." "Wait, build a house?" When I asked again, Jacob nodded excitedly and said with a grin, "And it's going to be a two-family house." "Two-family? Why all of a sudden? Are you saying Leon and his family will live with you?" When I asked, Leon nodded. Thinking it's not exactly living together if it's a two-family house, I grabbed Leon's arm, took him to the corner of the room and asked quietly, "Hey, didn't your wife say she didn't want to live with you guys? And that she'd rather live with her own mother if possible?" "Oh, no worries there. After all, the one who suggested building this two-family house was Kira." "What, really?" I'd always thought that Kira was against living with Jacob, so I never imagined that she was the one who planned this two-family house project. Jacob showed me the floor plan, boasting to me, "Isn't it great?" More than that, I was unable to decipher Kira's intentions and was a bit worried. "Hey, did Kira really say okay? You guys aren't just pushing this on her, are you?" When I checked, both Jacob and Leon laughed. No, it was really her idea. She's worried about Dad." "You really got yourself a good wife, Leon. Unlike Sherry, Kira is adorable. You're a lucky guy." Saying so, they laughed out loud. Both Jacob and Leon insisted Kira suggested it. Kira proposed we live together because she's worried about Dad. They were happy saying this, but I had a hunch. I just couldn't believe that Kira proposed this duplex idea purely out of goodwill. A few days later, I was called back to my family home to discuss the floor plans. Upon arriving, I found Kira was there too, and I decided to press her a bit. "Hey, Kira, are you really okay with this? Living together, I mean. You never seemed too keen on the idea." Upon hearing this, Kira smiled broadly and said, "Of course, I'm worried about my father-in-law. And as a daughter-in-law, I feel it's my duty to help as much as I can." She punctuated her statement with a power pose, arms flung out confidently. Watching her, Leon chimed in. "Sis, you worry too much. Or are you perhaps jealous of us moving into a brand new house?" Ha! His comment was somewhat jarring. "That's not it. I'm just concerned about potential arguments down the line." Upon hearing that, Jacob, trying to tease me, said, "Don't lie. You just want to live with us too, right?" "Sorry, but no way." Just show me the floor plans already. I'll look and leave," I sighed. While we were in the midst of this back and forth, Kira's phone rang. "I'm sorry, it's my mom. I'll take this outside," she said and left the room. Jacob and Leon showed me the floor plan, bragging about this room and that detail for what felt like an eternity. Yet something about the floor plan nagged at me. "Hey, what's this big room for? Was it there when you showed me last time?" When I asked that, Leon began to explain. "Oh, that? Kira requested that room," Leon began. "She said we could use it freely and it could serve as a guest room when someone comes over." Jacob chimed in, seemingly impressed. "Kira really thinks of everything, huh? What a good kid." But something about that room didn't sit right with me. It was about twice as big as any other room. A guest room, isn't it a bit too large? It's the biggest room in the whole plan. At my question, Leon and Jacob gave troubled looks. Well, Kira really insisted on this room. "If Kira wants it that way, then it's fine. You shouldn't interfere," they concluded. Feeling rather annoyed at this point, I decided to head home. "I'm leaving," I announced and stepped out of the room. As I did, I heard Kira's voice. She was still on her call, her voice just audible. I hadn't intended to eavesdrop, but I couldn't help but overhear her conversation. "Yeah, it's fine, Mom. I've made sure to create your room. Don't worry, they'll do as I say. Once you start living with us, I'll kick out the old man." She was telling her mother, clearly. I turned unconsciously toward her voice and our eyes met. Kira quickly ended her call. "Oh, sister-in-law, are you leaving already? Do visit us once the house is ready." Kira smiled at me, so I asked her, "Is what you just said true?" Kira's eyes widened for a moment, but she quickly regained her composure. "What do you mean? I'm going back to my room." With that, she left. Something was definitely off. I decided the best thing to do was to go home and talk to Adolf. A few days later, Adolf and I headed to my in-laws' home. Of course, we had asked my brother-in-law and his wife to be there in advance. "Sherry, you've called us all here. What's this about?" Jacob asked, to which I answered straight to the point. "Building a duplex house is a mistake. Kira will take it over and it'll be the end of it." My words left Jacob and Leon speechless. "How can you say such a horrible thing?" Kira pretended to cry, exclaiming. Seeing her reaction, Leon and Jacob glared at me. "What's wrong with you? Why would you say such a thing?" "You just don't want us to live together, do you? Just leave," they yelled back at me. "Just listen to me, Leon and Dad, you are being deceived." Despite my serious plea, both Jacob and Leon refused to listen. "You're the worst." "We've been wrong about you," they shot back. At that moment, something snapped inside me. I slapped the table and spoke clearly to Leon and Jacob. "Do you know that woman planned to bring in her mother after the duplex is built and kick Dad out, and you still want to build it?" With that, Kira shuddered. Leon and Jacob, taken aback by the truth, muttered, "No, it can't be true. Kira, you were worried about me and wanted to live together." They started mumbling. Kira, sensing trouble, quickly replied, "Of course, it's all for you, Father. My mom has nothing to do with it." She tried to dodge the situation, but I wasn't going to let that happen. I had no choice but to reveal the truth to her. "Okay, Kira, if you insist, but if you really want to build, buy the land of this house from me first." "What?" Kira was puzzled. "You see, the land where this family home is built was originally my mother's, and I got it in exchange for helping Leon, who was in a financial crisis at the time. I'm not going to let you use this land for your selfish purposes. If you really want to do it, I'll sell it to you at double the price. If you're really worried about Jacob and want to live together, you can afford that much, right?" With that, Kira fell silent. Jacob shouted, "Then I'll pay. Isn't that enough?" That's when Adolf, who had been silent all this time, finally spoke. "Dad, Leon, I hate to say this, but even if Sherry is hated by both of you, she's trying to protect you. If things go Kira's way and her mom moves in and Dad gets kicked out, Leon, can you take responsibility?" Adolf's calm and steady statement was strikingly credible, and both Jacob and Leon were stunned into silence. Seeing this, Kira, unable to stand it any longer, started to make a fuss. "Leon, you don't believe them, do you?" She started arguing. Kira directly addressed me. "Stop making absurd accusations. I'm not planning on letting my mom live here." So I asked Leon, "Leon, can I borrow your mobile phone? I've got this." "Huh?" "Just trust me. I'll call Kira's mom and see what's going on." Upon hearing that, Kira turned pale and yelled, "No, stop!" "Is there something you're worried about?" When I asked her, Kira glared at me and said, "Enough! There's no way I'd live with a bothersome father-in-law like you. I only thought of living together because you offered to pay for a nice duplex for Mom and me. Sorry for that." With that, she stormed out of the house. Leon hurriedly chased after her, leaving a stunned Jacob behind. Later, he said, "I guess I'm being punished for bad-mouthing you, my own daughter." Jacob, who made the comment with a smile, looked somewhat lonely. In the end, Leon followed Kira. Now he's renting a spacious condo and living with Kira and her mother. It seems Kira and her mother hold all the power. It's pitiful, especially considering he's my own brother. On the other hand, Jacob came to apologize to me. "I'm sorry for all the selfish things I said. I owe you, Sherry. I then shared with Jacob what Adolf and I had been considering. Dad, why don't you live with us? We're thinking of buying our own home. At that, Jacob nodded with an apologetic look. Since then, he's been cooperative whenever I suggest going to the hospital. Although he was diagnosed with dementia, he takes his medicine without complaint. This has slowed the progression, and we're managing to live together. Jacob has been saying thank you to me more often since then. I think he feels guilty about refusing to live with me in the past, but to me, it doesn't matter anymore. He's my father, we're blood, and he means a lot to me. Adolf has also been supportive of Jacob, and I'm nothing but grateful. From now on, I plan to cherish each day in hopes of spending as much time as possible with Jacob